On today's agenda, we'll start off with a welcome and housekeeping from myself, and then I'll just give a bit of background to the Dare UK programme, an overview of our aims and goals, and a bit of context setting around some key terms relating to the work we're doing. After that, we'll move to the main event, which is presentations from representatives from each of the 5 driver projects. Each presenter will have about 10 minutes to present on the work they did, and then 5 minutes afterwards of questions and answers. And then we'll close after that. So a couple of housekeeping points to start off with. If you could keep your microphones muted throughout, that'd be great. When we get to the Q&A section, if you'd like to ask a question out loud, you can then unmute and ask your question and then mute again. As people are presenting, feel free to post your questions in the chat, and then there'll be 5 minutes after each presentation to answer those questions. Again, if you'd rather answer the question verbally, just raise your hand and ask it out loud. We do ask that all communications are respectful and that they relate to the driver project's work and the programme. We will be recording today's webinar, and the recording will be shared after the event, and all slides will be shared too. Okay, so just moving on to the programme overview. So my name is Michelle Amugi, and I'm a programme manager for the Dare UK programme. And Dare UK is focused on designing and delivering a national data research infrastructure. And it aims to be joined up, trustworthy, and support research at scale for public good. Now, our focus is around sensitive data, and that tends to sit in trusted research environments. But sometimes that data sits in more than one secure environment, and we're looking at how to improve or enable the capabilities that allow for data from different sources to be connected with each other and analysed. And a good example of this is with the COVID-19 pandemic, where the UK's response meant that data was pulled from different sources and linked to create an effective response. And that's the national capability that we're trying to push forward, so that it's not only in such circumstances that that kind of thing happens, but that it's there, the capability is there, but at the same time, confidentiality and security is well maintained. The Dare UK programme is funded by UKRI, and we have oversight from both Administrative Data Research UK, ADR UK, and HDR UK. A bit more about the programme. So we are a pan-UKRI programme, meaning that we link to all the UKRI research councils because our focus is on cross-domain sensitive data research. And we are a multi-phase programme spanning 6 years. So we started in July 2021 with a design and dialogue phase and moved on to phase 1B. And it's been an extensive listening and learning exercise where we've been liaising with the community to understand more about the work that is in place, the needs of the community, and the ways to move forward. We're looking towards April 2024 now, where we'll move to the build, test, and establish phase. So just a little bit on some of our key terms. So the focus of Dare UK is around sensitive data. And sensitive data essentially is data that contains personally identifiable information. So things like names, addresses, or commercially sensitive information. And even though that data is de-identified, it can still be sensitive. So for example, if it's linked with other data, those pieces could then potentially be used to identify. So some examples of sensitive data are things like educational data that's held by the Department of Education, or NHS data, or even data such as your work history, tax payments, etc., which is held by the Department for Work and Pension. Now, sensitive data is held in trusted research environments to help make that data secure and safeguard the data. And by allowing researchers to access sensitive data, valuable insights can be given into society and how we operate so that policies and other things and public services can be created or improved to help make society better. So a bit on the trusted research environment. Trusted research environments are safe, secure computing environments where researchers, scientists, and other experts can gain valuable insights on data by accessing sensitive data. And that sensitive data comes from a range of sources. So as mentioned previously, it could be health records, educational records, and other sources too. And only approved researchers can access that data, and it has to be in a de-identified form. By using TREs, trusted research environments, it helps to ensure that the data stays within the TRE and is not downloaded onto a researcher's own system. Other safeguards are also put into place to help protect data. And one way in which data is protected is through the 5 SAFEs framework. And that is safe people, first of all, so ensuring that only those who are trained and specifically accredited researchers can access data. Safe projects, ensuring that data is only used for ethical, approved research where there's clear potential for public benefit. Safe settings, ensuring that access to data is only possible through secure technology systems and that the data never leaves the TRE. Safe data, where researchers only use data that has been de-identified in order to make sure that privacy is protected. And lastly, safe outputs, which is where the outputs, the work that the data has produced, the research has produced, is checked to make sure that there is no way of identifying the subjects of the data. So that's just a couple of key terms that relate to the work that we're doing. I'm now going to hand over to Rob, who is the Dare UK technical lead, and he's going to talk about how the driver projects, which we're here to hear about today, fit in with the overall Dare UK vision.
Thanks, Michelle. If I can channel my inner Sir Chris and say, next slide, please. Thanks. So this is a deliberately faded out picture of what we call the architecture of a corner of the UK's landscape of trusted research environments and supporting services. There are other things that we need to have in the mix to enable things to work the way we think they can. So if you think there's a trusted research environment, TRE on the right there, as a researcher, and IG is the information governance authority who controls what can happen inside that TRE. There's another one over on the left where the IG authority is taking data from the data controller, making it available within the TRE environment for researchers to access. So you'll see there are 2 TREs here. They're different, they're in different parts of the country perhaps. And how do you connect them together while maintaining that safety and security? That's a key aspect of what the Dare UK programme is about, and that's a key aspect that our driver projects strove to address over the last year. All this is done in the context of the 5 SAFEs framework, as Michelle's described, and our driver projects sort of address different aspects of 5 SAFEs within this overall picture. So next slide, Michelle. There we go. So the SARA project we'll hear about looks very much at safe data, where data are flowing into this overall secure environment. Are they safe enough? And can we improve the way that we prepare data so it's suitable for research while maintaining the privacy of those people who might be in that data set? So SARA looked very much at safe data, if you like. Next, please. At the other end, when outputs are created by a researcher within a trusted research environment, they need to be looked at before they can be released to the outside world for publication, perhaps. And they need to be looked at for, again, reasons of privacy, disclosure control. And the SACRO project looked very much at that end of things, the safe outputs. Are there tools you can put in place which will help the Information Governance Authority and the researcher be more efficient at the way outputs are released from a trusted research environment? Next, please. So you'll notice the 2 TREs currently don't connect, but the Teleport project looked at one possible way of connecting the data TRE over on the left with the researcher TRE over on the right, using the interaction of other services. You see the software service come into the picture at the top there. Teleport will explain what they've done in detail later. Next slide, please. Trifix also looked at the same challenge of connecting TREs, but with a different emphasis and a different slant. The two things are complementary. And you can see we're building up a sort of jigsaw. The projects fit together into this picture. That's partly by accident, but partly by design. We've changed the picture over the course of the last few months to reflect what the driver projects learned and what we've taken from the driver projects. So the way we think about fitting these things together has been strongly informed by the work the driver projects did, and we're getting a much better picture of how it can all work in the future. So Trifix and Teleport both looked at this idea of connecting TREs together. And final click for me, Michelle. And the Sartre project looked at what is a TRE anyway. We're kind of in the position, we know it when we see it, but can we kind of capture what it needs, what you need to put in place to be able to call yourself a TRE, a specification for a TRE? And Sartre tried to bring all those things together. And so you can see the work of the driver projects has fleshed out this picture for us, and we'll hear much more detail very soon. That's everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. So on that note, we will move on to the main body of today's webinar, the driver project presentations. And we have first off Elizabeth Green from SACRO.
Hello everyone, so hopefully you can see my screen and my presentation. Can you confirm that?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. So thank you for having us today. This presentation was generated by myself. I am a lecturer at the University of the West of England, and in the SACRO project, I was the industry lead, and it was also produced by Katie Oldfield, who was the public engagement officer. Unfortunately, she has a cold today, so she will not be attending. But the overall project was led by Jim Smith. So, as previously noted, there's the 5 safes, and we have the different components of the 5 safes. This project, SACRO, which is semi-automated output checking, focuses on the safe outputs spectrum. So a quick whistle-stop tour about the setup and what the problem was we were addressing. When we have data which is held in a data repository, once a researcher is approved, safe people, and their project is approved, they can request some data to come out of the data repository. And what this will be, this can be taken from a giant set of data like NHS records, education records, taxation, pension records, that type of thing. So what will happen is a subset of that data will be extracted. It will then be pseudo-anonymized. And what that means is all the direct identifiers, such as your name, such as your full address, will either be removed or it be replaced with a code. The data is then, only then, put into the what we call the safe setting or the safe environment. And this is the analytical area in which our researchers can then conduct their analysis. So the researchers conduct their analysis and generate the things that they want for their publications, such as graphs, tables. But before that can be released and go out into the world, it needs to be checked. and it needs to be checked to make sure that no part of the analysis is a person can be identified, or there's a risk of a person being identified. And this is the role of an output checker. And this is where we tend to see a giant bottleneck happen, because it's quite a laborious task looking through all the different graphs and working out. So what did we do to try and help with this? We designed and implemented a semi-automated system that checks for disclosure risk on common research outputs. And it works on two ways. You have the immediate feedback to the researchers while they're carrying out their analysis. It will flag up to the researchers in red and say, you know, this is a bit risky. Try and redo this again so there's no risk in it. And then it works in that it provides a centralized system for the output checkers to look at with traffic light systems. So it will flag up to the output checker and say, this output looks a bit dodgy, so to say. And what this means is it allows us to continually mitigate against the bottleneck and also provide some improved consistency within the output checkers themselves. We also updated and generated documents which for the output checkers and also researchers, providing kind of that background information into disclosure control. And then we also worked with public to generate a consensus statement. So if I can just move this bar away. There we go. So who did we talk to as part of generating this project? We didn't do this in isolation. It wasn't a case of a load of researchers and scientists kind of sat in the corner creating this program, creating these documents. We made sure that we were talking to researchers. We made sure that we were talking and involving actively our public panels and members, and of course the data organisations themselves. So ensuring that we got the whole view and perspective of what was happening, and ensuring that we're implementing a tool that was having purpose. Okay, so here we can see, sorry, just ensuring, here we can see how SACRO works. You have the researcher. So the researcher has an idea. They then go through appropriate approval training processes. The data is then prepared, pseudo-anonymized, placed in the TRE. They access it. They complete their analysis. And as they are completing this, the whole time, the SACRO program is prompting them, saying, yep, this looks okay. There's no disclosure risk. Or hang on a minute. Let's potentially do this. Then the researcher submits a request to take the output out of the TRE, and it will flag up if there's any issue. Okie dokie. So here we can see it a bit more better in that it will flag with these different colours. And then from an output checker perspective, it will also provide that overview. And what's quite handy is you can see here, this is what our output checkers see. So you can see this is a nice harmonized centralized system where they have all the outputs that the researcher wants. It already has flagged reds, the ones which are a potential issue. And it will tell the output checker why it has failed. And it will highlight exactly any issues that they have. and the output checker can then write and provide feedback to the researcher and vice versa. So alongside generating this automated tool to be placed into the TREs to support them, and just to say as well, this is semi-automation. The role of the output checker is still extremely important in having that oversight. This is here to help process and address that bottleneck. So alongside generating this program, we also developed a consensus statement, and this was with public panels, stakeholders, all the different organisations, and it went through multiple iterations about how we should implement SACRO. And we asked organisations to then sign up to the statement. And we got many of the Scottish Safe Havens did, and also the Office of National Statistics did, and a few others. What does this mean for the future? Well, the team are currently working with organisations to help implement SACRO within the TREs, and we're also working with internationally to help more people use this tool and support the output checkers. And we also have a wide range of documents that we produced to support the research community, including guides and documents into disclosure control. So there's plenty of the future, and we're extremely grateful for the opportunity that Day UK gave us in developing this. And we have a number of different links where you can review the project and the documents, as well as a contact email. So please get in touch.
Thank you very much, Lizzie. It's fantastic. And you kept the time as well. So we now have about 5 minutes for any questions relating to the SACRO project. And you can either type those into the chat, or if preferred, you can use the raise hand function and then unmute your mic. So Lizzie, we have a question here from T. Robinson. Saying, okay, presumably SACRO is mandatory. What do TREs who do not use instead? So
traditionally, outputs have always been reviewed by what we call 4 sets of eyes. So 2 individuals who are trained in this area or have experience in reviewing the outputs and trying to see if it's almost like a Sudoku, trying to see if they can mathematically unpick the results which have been sent. And there will be 2 output checkers who will be reviewing this. So traditionally, it's quite a long process. And bear in mind, I'm a researcher myself. I use the TREs for research when I'm doing other projects and work. You can be requesting a large amount of tables for publications and graphs, and sometimes you're having to wait up to a month because, you know, you're in a long queue of researchers ahead of you. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks, Lizzie. And then we have another question. So is SACRO susceptible to bad actors who may attempt to gain access to private data by corrupting the program function?
So in terms of bad actors, as a psychologist originally, I would say part of the Safe People function is we are ensuring these individuals have undergone rigorous training. They have to pass a test before they even enter or use the trusted research environment. They have to be affiliated with an organisation such as a university, a policy, government organisation, and so forth, and they have to demonstrate that the accessing this data is of public good. In terms of the utility they could potentially get out of this data for public risk, as I would say, as a side note, it would probably be easier to gain that from public data such as social media data. That's probably worth a lot more and a lot more detailed than what we would traditionally get in a TRE. So SACRO itself sets up the risk and minimization and will allow that. I see Felix has his hand up, so I'll let him come in.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the bad actors issue, then it's not really relevant on here. If there was someone who wanted to abuse the TRE, there are much better ways that they would find to do this, and much better ways that they could hide what they're doing. To try and hide stuff in outputs is really bad, because A, it's clunky, and B, it's easy to discover. So that's why this is where the 5 safes comes in, is that you have all the other elements, you put them together. When we look at output, what we're primarily doing is managing the risk of erroneous output. So people have done something silly that may inadvertently reveal something. So that's what we're primarily guarding for. That's not strictly true if you're looking at machine learning outputs, because there are potential other things to be done, or in certain things like remote job models. But generally, the principle is that when you look at outputs, you are looking at helping people make sure they don't make silly mistakes. If you think you have bad actors in there, that's why you have your settings and we have your people, and that's where you should be looking to manage things.
Yeah, and also to say, I've just noticed Will's comment. There's only so much we can do with tech control. We should resort to legal, contractual control to lose your research passport and job, maybe. That already exists. If you were caught doing this and you're really, doing that intention, you do get blacklisted, and there is always the jail and punishment. We tend to find that academics aren't motivated in that way anyway, and if there are any breaches, which is usually breach of practice and not any disclosure of data, it's due to laziness, not malintention.
Lizzie, I think we have time just for one more question with a short answer. And then if you could perhaps respond to the other questions in the chat, that would be really, really helpful. Thanks. So just last question, what formats for research outputs does SACRO support?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So SACRO was built in Python, and at present supports Stata, R, and quite a few of the packages. And yeah, so it's free for download as well on GitHub.
Lovely. Thank you, Lizzie. So Lizzie will respond to some of the questions in the chat. And we're now going to move on to the SARA project, and we have Stuart Dunbar presenting.
And thank you very much. Just share the slides. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stuart Dunbar, one of the work package leads in the semi-automated risk assessment or SARA project, and engagement manager at Datalock, a partnership of the University of Edinburgh and NHS Lothian. The SARA project was led by Arlene Casey, a colleague of mine from Datalock, and it was underpinned by a collaboration across several trusted research environments and health data specialists. The SARA project focused on the semi-automation of risk assessments at 2 parts of the data access process. So we looked at improving record keeping around how data from different sources are brought together for research, known as data provenance, and also the identification of privacy risks within unstructured free text. I'll provide a little further context about these priorities before turning to these pieces of work that we did in the project. So to support direct patient care, there are a number of different data systems which work brilliantly, but they're quite independent of each other. Those on the screen are a very brief snapshot. When trying to use health data for research, a lot of effort is required to bring these data together and make them research ready. For example, data from the different systems are combined and then de-identified to protect people's identities. When a researcher approaches a trusted research environment for data, they submit an application and after some time receive a de-identified data extract. However, they know nothing about how the data were linked together or what couldn't be shared with them or why. So, for example, some data may have been removed due to potential identifiability concerns. It might help the researcher to be aware of what has happened during the data linkage process, since knowing what has been removed may be informative for their analysis and the reliability of any conclusions that they could make. For our work on the privacy risks in free text, it's important to note that the vast majority, if not all, research supported by trusted research environments currently involves structured data. So structured data has a fixed and therefore expected format, such as names, dates, codes for different conditions. De-identifying these data is relatively well understood. Unstructured data, such as typed or dictated notes, are much more challenging as the privacy risks are much more complex due to the inclusion of what are known as direct and indirect identifiers. Direct identifiers, such as names and addresses, are removed to ensure patient confidentiality is maintained. Indirect identifiers, such as the ages of any children a person might have, rare conditions, descriptions of self-harm, involvement with police or social services, are not so black and white in terms of potentially disclosing somebody's identity. These are more likely to appear in free text, so an approach to robustly process indirect identifiers is needed before any sharing of free text data is possible. So for the SARA project, our public consultation was core to the efforts of both technical pieces of work that we undertook. We wanted to secure the input of members of the public on challenging questions we had in our data provenance and privacy risk priorities. Our goal was to explore how processes in trusted research environments could be further developed and improved while being seen as trustworthy. Through Ipsos Scotland, a specialist research organisation, we held discussion workshops with a cross-section of society. After these, we had further questions we wanted greater input on, and we secured survey responses from over 1,000 adults in Scotland on these additional areas. And I'll highlight the main impacts of the public consultation as we move through the rest of these slides. So turning to data provenance specifically, our initial efforts focused on seeking the valuable perspectives of all of those involved in linking and delivering data for research. So data analysts, information governance specialists, research coordinators, and so on. What did they all need from a data provenance tool to support what they need to do in their roles? This information was combined and analysed and then informed the production of a prototype dashboard that aims to provide this necessary information. Here is an example of the dashboard in action using a dummy data set. The area in red highlights indicators of whether all the data present in the data set are within the limits of what was originally requested by the researcher. While the yellow cells in the final column of the table indicate to the user that perhaps not all the expected data have been included. So this would or should prompt an action from the user. If they were a data analyst, they might then check the code to ensure that everything is working as it should. At present, this check can happen, but it is highly manual and relies on the individual looking at everything, which is somewhat time-consuming. This dashboard essentially ticks off the easy stuff and encourages the user to spend their time more efficiently on potential problem areas. Key recommendations from the public consultation resulted in changes to the original designs so that the check on whether the data are within the limits is pulled out as a distinct section above the table. That color coding for missing data was consistent, and that a decision log, including comments from named individuals, could be added within the same dashboard to help capture some of the data linkage decisions that had been made, and then these could be returned to in the future if any review was necessary. For our privacy risk priority, the foundation activity was to understand how identifiers are present in hospital discharge summaries, since mapping the possible risks informs how mitigation steps could be put in place. A natural language processing approach was taken to identify examples of identifiers within the discharge summaries, and then explore how these appear and link or not within the text to create an overall understanding. Among the things we discovered, we found that often where one indirect identifier is present, then others can also appear in close proximity. And in combination, these would raise the risk of someone becoming potentially identifiable. As for our data provenance work, the public consultation participants endorsed a semi-automated approach, so the computer should be used to support human decision-making. A key conclusion was that indirect identifiers should be treated in the context of the research objective. So, for example, the retention of details of self-harm may be genuinely important and relevant for one research project and therefore should be included within the data set. But these may not be relevant at all for another project, and so they would be removed for that one. And it was also suggested that clinical and data specialists should be involved to support privacy risk decisions where possible. Like the data provenance priority, we consulted those involved in trusted research environments on what they would want to see within the dashboard that would support their decision-making. The recommendations from this consultation were combined with those from the public consultation to create the initial prototype that you see here, which allows the dataset to be inspected in terms of summary demographics data and the presence of potential risk categories. The result here is not to remove human decision-making, but to highlight where greater attention needs to be focused in order to mitigate possible privacy risks. This will enable decisions to be made more quickly without compromising the robustness and therefore the quality of the privacy risk-checking process. In many ways, our work has only just started. There are a number of next steps that we are looking to develop. So trialing the dashboards in other trusted researcher environments to check they work under different conditions, developing different dashboards designed for the specific needs of different users, verifying if the privacy risk approach works for other types of clinical records beyond hospital discharge summaries, further public consultation to ensure that any future development aligns with the values of wider society, and combining the two dashboards into a single overview tool to help mitigate against a variety of risks. So thank you very much for listening to that brief overview. I'll be delighted to take questions and either respond directly or call upon my colleagues who are in the room. If you feel as though you want to contact us afterwards, by the way, the email address is up there as well.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Stuart. And again, excellent timekeeping. So questions. We have one question so far from Christopher, just asking whether the SARA program is focused on reviewing, assisting in the import process. So is it focused on reviewing the data provided by controller matches, and my screen's jumped, before being moved from the file drop-off point to TRE proper?
I haven't followed that question. You cut out a little bit during it, unfortunately. Could you repeat that?
Okay, so is the SARA program sitting in the import process, i.e. reviewing that the data provided by controller matches what is expected before being moved from file drop-off point to TRE proper?
Okay, I suppose there's two aspects. Kate's put her hand up. Go on, there's no point me saying it. Kate, you're the expert in this area. Come in.
Yeah, so we took into consideration the full data workflow. So straight from the point of import to the point of release to researchers. And one of the tools that we also created, and again, all of this is available on GitHub, is a data access request form that would allow researchers to select their variables, and the tool allows us to check the variables that has been selected by researchers against the specific project permissions to ensure that no variables have been excluded and that should have been excluded, and no variables have been included that should have been included.
Lovely, thanks for that, Kate. So just seeing if there's other questions. Another question from Heidi. How are the data processed to fit the safety criteria? Is this done by people who work for the data owner of the data platform? And do you have a list of criteria to check?
Kate, I'm afraid this is probably your question.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Stuart.
No
yes,
worries.
So we work again within all of the regulations. So again, for the delivery of the data provenance piece, we are an institution in Scotland, and so therefore we work within all of the information governance frameworks as required by the Public Benefit and Privacy Panel. And so effectively, there are larger information governance and legal regulations that are required for each project. And as data processors on behalf of NHS health boards or other organizations that they might be collaborating with, we have a legal and information governance obligation. So the data provenance component effectively allows us to make sure that we incorporate all of the checks and permissions and regulations are in place in order to process that data correctly and in a clear kind of way. Now, I should say all organizations are doing this, but what we found and where the need kind of came from is that they do this across different systems, different platforms, and they oftentimes don't necessarily align into a single workflow. And so really the goal here for us was to provide that single a platform to be able to do this from start to finish and watch as the data moves through those different processing steps and to capture everything in a single output. And so that way it effectively then provides another check and balance for information governance teams, auditors, etc., to make sure that the data processed is exactly what is specified by that project.
Can I maybe ask a follow-up question to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you for these explanations. So what I'm interested in is like if like I'm working on something similar for a similar platform, and we're currently working on setting up like a checklist, what needs to be done in order to make the data safe. And I was wondering if this is something that you have and could maybe share. And yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll pop the GitHub page into the chat. So again, it's also in our final outputs. So there's the link in there, but I'm also very happy to have an offline chat about all the things that we do. We work to ISO 27001 standards, as do many trusted research environments. So again, happy to have those conversations for bespoke organizations. And just to kind of align, but we'll make all of that information is out there, and again, it's all available and free to download.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks, Kate and Heidi. Just another question: is there a way for the data depositor to see what projects their data was used in?
I mean, I think that's a question that goes beyond the SARA project into kind of the use of data, secondary use of data for research and other purposes. So Wesley, your hand is up. Do you want to make a general point about that, or have you got a different?
I think perhaps because that is a broader question, someone from the delivery team, from the UK delivery team, will respond to that via the chat. Or Fergus, yes, go on.
I mean, I was simply going to say that best practice really is about public data use registries, right? So that you can actually go to a public registry and see what data is being used for what projects. Does it all exist in one place? Is it all consistent across the UK and across the different sort of research enabling TREs? No, but generally speaking, TREs do make that information available in some form or other. Usually through public registers that you can go and look at. I hope that answered the question. Happy to keep going in chat if it didn't.
Thanks, Fergus. I believe there's no further questions for the SARA project. Stuart, thank you very much for your presentation, and Kate, thank you for your response to the questions as well. We'll move on now to Carol Goebel, Professor Carol Goebel, speaking about the Terrifics project.
Thank you. And hopefully you can see my screen. Can I get the confirmation?
Yes, I can see it.
Thank you very much. Oops, there we go. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to speak. This is about the Terrifics project, which is a plumbing project. We're plumbers. And this is a presentation from myself, Phil Quinlan, who's also in the call at the moment, and Gillian Beggs, who was our PIE patient representative. So the Terrifics project brought together federated analytics toolkits that already exist from the commercial sector, from the public sector, infrastructure providers who have been building infrastructure that supports trusted research environments and federated environments, and trusted research environments themselves, in order to be able to solve or try to address some of the key plumbing challenges of using multiple TREs. So as we heard in the introduction, researchers run their analysis on many TREs and then combine the results. But how do we reduce the burden on the researcher to query the many TREs? And how do we reduce the burden on existing TREs and analysis toolkits to implement this multiple access, multiple querying within the 5 Safes framework? And our approach was to try to streamline the plumbing needed. So at the moment, we have various different toolkits. Each toolkit has its own unique exchange standards, and we just heard that metadata is absolutely critical to move around the TRE environment. We just heard that from the previous 2 talks. We also then have all the different TREs themselves, which all have different implementations. Many are well established. They could be on-premise or in the cloud. Each one develops a bespoke solution so that researchers and these toolkits can access them. Each researcher needs to make sure, and each toolkit needs to make sure their code is compatible with each one. Each has to be independently tested against the 5 Safes principles and validated by governance. And we've heard each of these has its own governance framing. So how can we streamline that? So in this project, we took 2 approaches. The first was to streamline how the processing is actually done of the queries that have been proposed. And so it's been done by adaptable and reproducible analysis pipelines. And what we wanted to do in TRIFICS was to use resources and techniques and tools that are already well known in the community and already established, and reuse them in the trusted research environment. So here, this is about using what's called pre-approved workflows. And here we mean computational workflows, analysis workflows that can be shared and work with any kind of technology. And these kind of processing pipelines, where you stitch together a number of different analysis steps on the trusted research environment, are inherently transparent and reproducible because they expose exactly what you did to the data. They can also be peer-reviewed for quality control and methodology. And there is an extensive collection of what called workflow management systems that make these multi-step processes operate, and that make sure that the code works in the trusted research environments as is expected. So these recipes for linking processing steps on the data are what we call these computational workflows. There's a large number of technologies, as I've already alluded to, particularly developed in the European research infrastructure world using international standards. And in particular, this project brought in a European research infrastructure called Elixir that specializes in the development of large-scale technologies for multi-site processing. And we have a number of technologies in order to be able to support, for example, the sharing of these analyses and the running of them, even when they're made in the many different workflow systems that could be used in the TREs. And we use several in our example. The second way we could streamline was be able to streamline the flow of information for the 5 Safes that we've already heard about. Again, this is about standardizing flow that works with all platforms and again supports transparency and reproducibility and could be peer-reviewed for quality and methodology again. So this is, how do you pass the information needed in order to be able to operate a 5 Safes process as we do this multiple TRE analysis. And we've heard in the previous 2 talks that such information is needed by all of the processes that were presented. So rather than doing this point to point, everybody has to pass information to everybody else, we have devised something called digital objects as carriers of the metadata. And this is called a 5 Safes RO crate. So what it enables us to do is that each of the analytic tools can handle and make one of these objects, and each of the TREs can use and also add to the RO crate. So these RO crates move around the processing, the plumbing needed in order to be able to link the analytic tools with the TREs. And this metadata then is used to drive all of the different processes that we've been hearing about. So we needed to devise this 5 Safes RO crate. It's based on something that's already been developed in Elixir, and effectively it carries the information about the user. It carries the information about the query that will be executed as a workflow in the TRE. It carries information about the metadata of the dataset and references to the datasets. It also carries the metadata about the pre-approved workflows that can be used to execute and run that query on the TRE, and the metadata in order to be able to describe the outputs that have been approved, including the provenance that we heard previously from the SARA project. So what we did in this project is we assembled all of the different components, and we assembled using research infrastructures that we already had, and we implemented it in a number of different tool sets and TREs, which I'll show briefly. Effectively, the TRE travels around and collects, the RO crate travels around and collects and carries the information needed at different phases. It doesn't touch or carry any data, it just carries the information. So we have the TRE is used, the RO crate is used in the check phase before it goes into a TRE, then it's validated, it's used to find the right workflow. The workflows have already been pre-installed in the TRE. It's used in the workflow execution phase. It's used to collect the metadata from to go into a disclosure phase, and then it goes out into a receiving phase and a publishing phase into the through the submission and egress layer back to those who pose the queries. And we can also register the object in a data use register, so we can see how the data was actually used for transparency. And we implemented all of these steps. We implemented it with Data Shield, who established an environment for doing analysis, and they can use RO crates, and they provided components for the analysis execution. We implemented it with Bitfund, which is a commercial platform specializing in federated learning, and we implemented it in the CERT platform, which is used in the Welsh and many other places, trusted research environment. So we executed this whole platform. How were the public involved? We had public involvement in several different ways. Our leadership is Gillian, and she was involved in the whole development of the proposal. And she also, in fact, chaired our technical meetings, which I think is quite an exceptional experience in my life as a researcher. We have a number of different videos that we developed and brochures for the public. We ran 8 different focus groups, which were organized by Autoline, who we procured in order to be able to run those so that they were independent to us. And it's very much important that we showed in our public engagement that it's really important for the need of clear and transparent communication and accountability in order to get public trust if we're going to do this kind of pan-trusted research environment analysis. And so that really emphasizes the work that we're doing. Our reflections, the RO crates works extremely well as standardizing the information flow around this complicated plumbing that we've had to produce in order to be able to make all these multiple TRE questions be posed and answered. The technology agnostic mechanisms for running the workflows work as well, but there are always deployment details that we hit, which have been extremely interesting for when we take forward. But what is really important is that we're able to accommodate existing governance processes, and the approach is developer sympathetic, so it's actually adoptable by platforms that already exist. So you don't have to start again. And it's proved to be very flexible and compatible with teleport, which is what we're about to hear. It leads to exposing transparent and reproducible analysis through these workflows, and it reuses existing standards and open standards as well, and existing services. So it's doable. That's the key point. The next
Carol, sorry, we've just gone a bit over on time. Yeah, so if I stop you there.
I'm just finishing up now.
Okay.
Is to complete the operational deployment, which is really about the processes of how UKRI journeys operate, how to approve workflows and when to onboard them, how to organize them, and so on. And moving forward, this approach is being taken forward into Health Data Research UK Federated Analytics Work Programme, where it will be combined with Teleport to create the infrastructure program that we need. We're going to take it forward into European projects, in fact, 2 major European projects, and it's being incorporated in several programs that the Trusted Research Environment that's been developed by Wales SERP is using, as well as being part of the Dare UK TRE blueprint. So that's where we are, and thank you. Sorry, I overran a little bit.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Carol. So any questions about the Terrifics project? I don't believe there's been any in the chat as yet.
And nobody likes plumbing. That's the problem. But without plumbers, you don't get water or data, actually, or metadata. You need plumbing, folks.
Okay, question from Gillian.
Hi, Gillian.
You're on mute, Gillian.
I pressed the wrong button. As plumbers, what are the tools you're using?
So you
what are
broke
the
up
tools?
there, Gillian.
What are your plumbers' tools?
What are my
Spanners,
plumbers' tools? So our plumbers' tools are these computational workflows, platforms that we use. So that enables, you can actually then express, this is how you're going to do the analysis in the TRE. And you can then put them into containers, and those containers can then be executed within the TREs. And so that streamlines.
What languages would they typically be written in?
So the languages are, so actually there's many languages. There are actually 340 workflow management systems, Gillian.
Wow.
So there's 340 languages, but we're actually homing in on the most popular ones. So what we use in this project was something called the Common Workflow Language, which is a language that attempts to do a common description of these workflows. But there are others. There's something called Nextflow, which is widely used. And we also use something called TESC, which is a task execution system. The infrastructure that we developed means that you can slot them in and out. So you can use whichever one you want, and the framework allows you to just call and execute that language for that particular query. And so it's a very general framework. And the system we used, which was called Workflow Execution Service, it's specially developed in order to be able to take any of the languages in and then to run the appropriate machinery in order to be able to answer that question. And that machinery is onboarded into the TRE through containers. That's the technical details behind there.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Carol, for your presentation, your response to the questions. I believe there's just one further question in the chat from Brian Finney. If you could respond to that via the chat, that'd be very helpful.
I will do.
Thank you. And then we'll hand over now to Chris Alton from the Teleport project.
Thanks, Michelle. Hope they can see that.
All good, Chris.
Okay.
Okay, fab. Right, thanks guys. Good afternoon. So I'm Chris Orton. I'm based at Population Data Science at Swansea University, and I'm going to be presenting on behalf of the Teleport programme, which was led by Professor Simon Thompson, who is the director of the Secure E-Research Platform, or SERP, out of Swansea University, and also on behalf of Carol Morris and Professor Mark Parsons, who led the work out of Public Health Scotland and EPCC at the University of Edinburgh, respectively, for the work that we put together over the last 9 months or so in 2023. The need for Teleport and I think Terrifics and a number of the movements towards federated analytics has been essentially brought forward in the priority list because of the increasing number of trusted research environments that exist now across the UK, but also those that are growing across the world. All of these exist for their own purposes, of course, but as Michelle mentioned in the opening introduction, the concept of making these interoperable so that you could respond to a pandemic or do general research and improve the efficiency of how research is deployed onto data in the NHS, and also for administrative data sets coming out of any other agency who provides them, is really where we're heading towards. The Teleport project was essentially trying to connect two existing mature trusted research environments and their infrastructures. So the use cases were the Sale Data Bank and the Public Health Scotland National Safe Haven based up in Scotland. And we've also included Northern Ireland in the picture because SERP also runs the infrastructure for Northern Ireland. So it is a nation we could bring online moving forwards within this sort of Celtic design that we have. But obviously the way that we've constructed Teleport, as I'll go into, essentially means that we're hoping to roll this out to anybody who'd be interested in creating a federated network of TREs through our solution. So I'm going to use the word plumbing again. So this seems a popular one, which we probably need to add to a definitions list at some point. But as Carol mentioned, the idea really between Terrifics and Teleport is to give different options in how you connect TREs together across a network. Really what you want to do here is provide flexibility to the researcher and also clearly allow data to be visible to each other within the confines of any governance that permits projects to take place. Really interoperability to allow that, either whole UK, internationally, whatever it might be moving forward is the goal. Teleport's concept is the pop-up TRE. Now this obviously is around the concept that a project is something that has a particular time frame and should go away at the end of its lifetime, but that these connect specific TREs and that this particular pop-up in the middle is a networked virtual environment which lives within existing TREs. The idea essentially being that in any collaborative project, one TRE can be a host, provide a virtual infrastructure which everybody then uses plumbing to actually network into, but it provides a consistent middle ground that is able for people to log into. The governance then allows that user to be trusted by all providers of data to that particular project, creating consistent capability in terms of data provision, consistent governance from each nation, retaining the way that they currently govern projects, and also providing a consistent user experience in terms of the software sets they're able to use, much in the same way that they would traditionally use a trusted research environment through more visible means in terms of seeing individual level anonymized data. Not that I'm going to go into the really technical elements of the approach, but this is just to show that both Wales and Scotland have slightly different ways of creating their trusted research environments, but also that there is a lot of complementarity. So we were starting from a good place of that there were lots of similarities, but we also had to respect that this is not a project and not a solution which is trying to change the way that existing trusted research environments who very much know what they're doing actually work. The red box that you can see on here is where the similarities are, and this is the software-defined solution that Teleport provides, but everything around the outside are the sort of homemade products which the current TREs use to make sure that data is safe, accessible, and obviously everything that's been spoken about in terms of user additions, capabilities, and data egress are all managed appropriately. The idea behind Teleport is that you have multiple trusted research environments feeding into this system, but it is a single pane of glass to be able to actually see all the data that is provided to a project underneath. So each TRE is a database in its own right, and yet the solution here doesn't need the TREs who are feeding data in this to change any way that they provision data. It's simply putting it in a place that the network can see that data, and it is analyzed in situ. Just something slightly more technical for the researchers who may be on the call today, but this is essentially a front door using a system called Trino, and this is a SQL-based query engine which can deploy onto data, whether it is sat in a database, whether it is sat in file store, and lots of different flavors of databases we have here. Now, this is simply a curation and a management engine, and the idea is that this is what you would use as a front door to actually get and deploy queries to create the cohorts that you then want to analyze through the system. That would then be pivoted to more traditional statistical software such as R, Stata, using Jupyter Hub, Python, etc., to be able to actually deploy more traditional epidemiology or statistical analysis onto data sat in situ, as mentioned. And the idea being that this being a software-defined deployable instance, it can scale depending on whatever the compute each TRE wants to give to a user. So if somebody needs HPC, more than possible. If somebody needs really traditional, low scale sort of standard compute in terms of a virtual desktop, then that's also obviously possible and is pretty much the standard. One of the features, and this is one thing that we're sort of really excited about moving forward, is that a Dare UK teleport feature, which is a web interface that is integrated into this, has also been made available to the Terrifics project, but is also the way that things are logged, are transparent, and are registered as per the teleport feature as well. So this is a submission layer, essentially allowing a user to be registered, trusted by TREs, authorized by TREs, and allocated to projects. So they could either use the teleport solution to go and use what I mentioned, that pop-up TRE from within wherever they've come from, to actually access data from multiple jurisdictions according to governance allowing them to do so. But in the Terrifics world, this again allows them to be pre-approved to be able to then deploy those workflows onto data sat out wherever that may be as part of the network. And this is just an example of how that is working. So projects, people, and TREs are all registered in their own right. It's very visible in terms of what they are, who they are, and why they should be trusted. And also the ability for all of their queries to then be logged and be visible to the community as well. In terms of governance for the Teleport project, we didn't actually need governance approval to create Teleport in the first place between Wales and Scotland, because we were simply creating an architected solution. However, we of course have engaged with the SAIL governance panel and the equivalent in Scotland that I think Rob alluded to earlier in one of the replies to queries, which was the PBPP panel up in Scotland as well. And that's both through sharing documentation about our perceived way things. This is hopefully changing things for the better, but without massive upheaval for the TREs, but also in meeting with them, of course, and presenting to them and having a place for them on panels and the meetings that we were having. The position now is that we should be able to use Teleport in applications for data, explaining that this is something which is available for users to actually say, I would like to use Teleport to run a study between Wales and Scotland. And of course, we're hoping that that could be for the rest of the UK moving forward. And what we're trying to show, and this is our engagement piece moving forward, is that there should be limited impact in terms of what the TREs have to do to actually join the network and therefore use Teleport to make their data available for analysis. In terms of public and involvement engagement, as I mentioned, it's been incredibly difficult in a project where you're essentially creating a very purely technical product to have PIE from the very, very start. But what we did is we described our ambition for how this was going to change things moving forward and hopefully increase the efficiency of research, which ultimately has public benefit. We've then also had lay representation within our meetings and obviously working with the panels that already exist for the nations who are relevant to Teleport. And then what our plan is that now that we're going to be deploying this for some real world use cases, go back and describe how we're actually doing this after being given that seal of approval to move forward. In summary, Teleport essentially grew that 2 TREs based in Wales and Scotland were able to agree that command and control and observability, so the ability to sort of allow people to use data, but also turn them off should any problems arise, was a critical point, and that needed managing. The multiple layers in terms of having to go into a host TRE to start with accreditation, so either SAIL or the Public Health Scotland's National Safe Haven in this case, and then go into the pop-up TRE within those TREs was one of the concepts which makes this secure, because of course data cannot come out of that pop-up before it then comes out of the other traditional TREs. And combining existing processes with this new software design solution was something that we obviously wanted to do to make this a combined process. Common components across DARE projects has been a massive win, we believe, and essentially the governance and the PPIE work we've done has shown this to be initially perceived as a safe step forward in the way that federation analysis within the context of trusted research environments can be involved. Just very briefly, In terms of real world initial first steps, within Swansea University, we're already looking at a use case for Teleport between the Sale Data Bank and Dementia's Platform UK, who both hold data in separated SERP tenancies. And the idea is that there is common reason to combine these data and use Teleport as that interface to access both TREs. And then in terms of rolling this out wider, there's a plan to combine Teleport and Trifix in Australia, connecting with UK infrastructure to combine Dementia's Platform UK and Dementia's Platform Australia for wider cohort study. Just a final one, and again, I think this will be, oops, sorry, this is my last slide. This is just to say that our report on the project is out on Zenodo in the Dare UK repository, and all of the GitHub repositories with open source code for this particular solution are available for review. Rather than with Sarah and the others, it's not necessarily installable by a single person because this is about architecting a TRE, but of course we are on hand to collaborate moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. So we have a question in the chat from T. Robinson. When TREs are sharing data, which controller has the key to the pseudonymized data for re-identification? Or will there never be calls for re-identification?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. In the standard way that researchers access data, I would suggest that 99% of projects, there will never be re-identification. It is not really in the modus operandi of TREs to support re-identification, including, as part of the 5 safes, it's something that is prohibited, particularly through the data access agreements users sign. However, should a use case arise where it is perfectly permissible, for example, there is fully informed consent to allow it to happen, then of course something like this could allow that to happen. It's not the standard setting, of course, but for example, if new trials or new cohort studies came and there was consent allowing re-identification for particular purposes, that could be something which is working directly with the NHS, for example, for care intervention or anything along those lines, then this is something that could make that more efficient moving forwards.
Thanks, Chris. We have time for one more question. I don't believe there are any more in the chat unless I've missed one. But if anyone has any further questions for Chris, feel free to raise your hand or type it in the chat. I'll give maybe about 30 seconds and then we'll move on. Okay, if anything does crop up in the chat, if you could just respond via chat, that'd be great, Chris.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for your presentation. So lastly, I'm going to hand over to Martin O'Reilly, who's presenting for the Sartre project.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so you should be able to see my slides for the full screen. Yeah, so as Michelle said, I'm going to be talking about Sartre project, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, is kind of looking at what is a TRE anyway, and can we sort of come up with some sort of common standards for trusted research environments. I'm one of the co-leads of the project, but it's a joint work with the Alan Turing Institute, University of Dundee, UCL, Research Data Scotland, Ulster University, and it's the Health Informatics Centre at Dundee, and so I'm presenting the work of the team here. So, as Michelle said at the start, a trusted research environment is a secure computing service that supports the 5 safes to enable working safely with sensitive data. So it ensures that only safe approved researchers can work on approved projects, and that the sort of data that comes in is sufficiently de-identified to sort of keep it safe while allowing the researchers to answer their questions, and that the data that goes out is even safer. So even if combined with data that's publicly out there, still sort of the patients or the public who are represented in that data at risk. And just to set some context, over the last few years, there's been a number of reviews and sort of opinions coming out from both government and Dare UK and others to sort of really push home this idea that bringing, rather than sending data out to researchers, bringing the researchers to data that has this sort of secure environment and information governance sort of around it is sort of how we should be working with sensitive data sort of going forwards. And in the UK, there are a very large number of trusted research environments with sort of different approaches to how they've sort of solved this problem of the 5 safes, and sometimes solving slightly different problems. So that may come down to choices about the infrastructure. Do they host it on the cloud? Do they host it on computers that they have on premise? Are those configured by pointing and clicking at things? Are they configured by running some code? How is that environment developed? Is it a commercial offering? Is it developed by the community? Is it open source so everyone can see what it is? Is it closed source? And sort of when it comes to what the information governance background that is, that can be driven by both different regulatory requirements across different sort of data domains, so health or finance or government data. And some have been mentioned already. ISO 27001 is the one standard. Cyber Essentials Plus is another in the context of the NHS, the Data Security and Protection Toolkit, DSPT. But sometimes it's also just driven by the conversations that individual trusted research environments and researchers have had with particular data providers or data controllers. And they might have different risk appetites, and together they may have come up with different but reasonable kind of choices about how they would protect data. And so what Sartre is trying to do is use a community-driven approach to understand sort of what all these TREs kind of do together, where they're solving the same problem the same way or a different way, or solving different problems, and to try and pull out from that. And that's that learn and explore phase. We sort of understand what's out there already and what choices people have made. And then to pull out from that where people are solving common problems, where they're solving them the same way, where they're solving them a different way, but it's equivalent. And we can say, actually, these folks are doing the same thing, really. And where they're solving different problems or they've taken different choices, and where those are driven reasonably by the different needs of the data and the people they're working with, and where those maybe could be drawn together in the future to be a bit more standard. And that's kind of where we've got to at the moment with the initial version of the standard. And then as we go forward, we're working within the UK Trusted Research Environment community to sort of guide and sustain and help organisations evaluate their trusted research environments against the standard. And as we do that with more and more trusted research environments, that will, identify some areas where we think the standard should evolve. And together as a community, we'll sort of continue to do that going forward. And from the start, transparency and openness has been a core principle and a core value for the team. And we've sort of done all of the collaborative development of the standard on a platform called GitHub, which allows lots of people to work together on text-based things. And it allows us to sort of run a little project board where we can have conversations around, top possible decisions we make on the standard and what we should prioritize next. And both that project board and the standard in its development are available publicly. And then open documentation. So this is a kind of more readable version of the standard. It's the latest agreed version, even from the very beginning when it was a very draft stage. And you can go on there and you can sort of read it in a nicely formatted way. And open communication. So how do we keep, keep other people and the public more broadly up to speed with what we're doing? And we've had a series of blog posts, 12 over the course of the project on Medium. And we've had this sort of dedicated contact email address, which you can still get to us on, hosted by the University of Dundee. So a little bit more on sort of what the standard is and sort of how it's evolved. It's based on these 4 architectural principles. And the first of these is usability. And while it's really important to keep the data safe, it's also important that researchers can answer those questions to improve public health or sort of benefit and the public. And so therefore they need to be able to access the software that helps them analyze and visualize the kind of data, and they need the tools that enable them to collaborate with each other and to sort of process that data. The other second sort of key principle for us is maintaining public trust. It's using the standard to help explain to people how trusted research environments in each of these different environments keep the data safe. The third strand for us in terms of principles is observability. So it's that audit to know how was that environment configured, when were those environment configurations changed, when was some new data added, when was data taken out, who did that, when did researchers access the data, so that we can demonstrate that those things we said we'd do, we're doing. And then the last sort of point, and a critical one, is this standardization, is to go from having to ask all these questions about individual trusted research environments to a model where each of those environments evaluates themselves against the common standard. And then when trying to understand what a particular environment does, you can see its checklist against the standard. And maybe as a data provider or a regulator, you can say, well, for our case, some of these non-mandatory things, we would like to insist upon those. And therefore, this environment is already doing that. And if we want to use this trusted research environment, we'll need to talk to them about points 3 and 4. And what that's come up with, as we've done this work with the community, is 29 capabilities. And these are sort of top level, what should a TRE do? And underneath that, there's some detail of these 160 statements. And some of these are mandatory. So as a community, we've gone, every TRE should do this. Can't really call yourself one if you don't do it. Then there's a lot of recommended ones, and these are ones where we said, well, it would be actually, if a TRE did this would probably improve it, and it would be a nice step up from the baseline. And then there's some optional ones, which as a community, we sort of decided are maybe only relevant in certain circumstances. And we organize these into 4 pillars around information governance, which is policy and processes for people's side around how you run the environment, who can do what. The platform itself, the computing technology, which helps enforce those information governance principles. Data management, who can move data in, who can move data out, and supporting capabilities. And this can be around accounting, around administration, but a really critical one in there is the public engagement expectations. How do you keep the public informed about how you protect their data? What's going on with it? And the idea here again is to create this uniform landscape so that everyone can evaluate their capabilities on a common sort of level, and it's a lot easier to compare and decide when 2 environments are equivalent to each other. And from the start, public inclusion has been critical to the project, and it's had a big impact on the specification itself. We've embedded public voices with 2 lay representatives who've been embedded as part of the project team in all of our meetings, involved in all of the decision making. We've led 6 workshops with the public, 2 at the start, which identified, where we talked about TREs, we talked about the goals of the project, and we identified the sort of key things that the public felt were important, and 4 to report on the project progress and get their input on the standard as it evolved. And some concrete ways this has influenced the standard itself is inclusion of public engagement statements around transparency and how people are involved in trusted research environments, and support for an inclusion of a statement on publicly reporting near misses and incidents and sort of what's happened as a result of those. And the final one, which we think was quite important, there was a lot of discussion about when something's optional, when it's recommended, when it's mandatory. And all of the public engagement statements have been upgraded to this sort of mandatory style, which means if you're handling personal data that involves members of the public, then this is something that really needs to be there as a platform, not just as a project. There's lots of things that require projects to do this, but as a platform, you're responsible separately for communicating to the public how you protect their data. And we've had this continuous focus on updating the wider community through our blog posts, etc. And the standard hasn't just been work that the project team have done, it's been done collaboratively and on a consensus basis with the whole trusted research environment community, those people who build, who run, and who use trusted research environments. And there's, again, lots of ways that's influenced the standard. Too many to list here, but some key ones are bringing information governance in. And the original idea was to keep it restricted to the technical layer, and expanded that out to say, no, really the technical layer is supporting the governance, is supporting these sort of policies and processes. And to put a bit more in around, look, what are we doing and why and how, and what are these core principles for us? We held 2 initial kickoff sessions with the community and followed up with a feature survey and some sessions to talk about that. Then over the 9 months, we've held 14 collaboration cafes, about once a fortnight, sometimes targeted on particular aspects of the standard, sometimes more broad, for any member of the community to come in and contribute. And we've had 25 non-project members contribute, making changes to the content directly on our collaborative platform, editing platform, GitHub, but many, many more make contributions to changing how the standard is through those collaboration cafes and their input into discussions there. If you want to find out more, we've got a couple of explainer videos. These are hosted on the University of Dundee Health Informatics Centre YouTube channel. There's a high-level one aimed at the public to talk about what is a trusted research environment. And if you want to learn a bit more, there's also one targeted at the trusted research environment community, people who run and use these, and you can take a look at that. On our Medium blog, we've got 12 posts so far over at various points in the project, including one about the sort of latest release. And we'll also continue to sort of update that as we do further work with the community and reevaluate different theories against the standard and maybe evolve the standard a little more. So thanks very much for your time. If you want to learn more, this Sartre specification, read the doc site, is where the latest version of the standard will always be. You can get in touch directly via this email address, or you can keep abreast of updates via our Medium blog. And with that, I will minimize this and open up for questions.
Thanks, Martin. We had a question from Tony Wildish. Rob has given a response, but perhaps you might want to add to it. Just asking how mature the Sartre specification is. Is it battle ready?
So that is a good question. So I guess it depends on the nature of the battle. I'd say what the key point for it at the moment is we think it's at a point where it captures, a core element of community consensus, and that it's in a position where trusted research environments can start a self-evaluation against the standard. And it's inevitable that what we'll do is we'll identify as we go along that we don't mean the same thing when we say certain things, or that some things we thought were requirements should be optional or mandatory requirements. Some things might change and become more mandatory or less mandatory, or we might find additional things that people think are important that they do in theirs that we haven't captured. And that's a kind of very natural sort of evolution when it comes to standards. And the project team members have ourselves at the UKRI and at the University of Dundee have done our evaluations and have them public, and we're working with others in the community to do their evaluations.
Thanks, Martin. And then we've got another question from, I believe it's Cicely. Any plans to more formally use the SARTRA mandatory standards to define a proper TRE?
So I think that's sort of, I think if we got to that point, that would be a nice place to go. We're at 2.0. So I think that's for us, that is a sort of ultimate goal to say, if not proper, but what's a baseline and kind of what are things that, let's get confidence on the must-haves and then on the sort of nice-to-haves. And this is kind of exactly what, why we've been doing this work. And I see there's a question about TREs and SDEs. I think sort of largely they're the same thing, solving the same problem. I think there's a bit of a discussion about whether they're things that that are built around the data, or they're things where you bring data to. But I think when you look at how you implement those, they're very, very similar. And part of the initial work that this Harry mentioned about how we're carrying forward the standards development as a working group within the UK TRE community. We've been working with the NHS SDE programme for quite a while, and as I understand it from Fiscal, they are taking the SARTRA standard as the sort of baseline for their own thinking about kind of what should an SDE look like. So I think we're seeing that kind of convergence there. I think for me, it's kind of, are they focused on the data, or are they focused on the kind of research that happens? But I think they're both different from more operational environments in that they work on the identified data.
Lovely, thank you very much, Martin. I can't see any further questions, and we've pretty much come to the end of our programme for today. So just to say a huge thank you to everyone for taking the time to attend. I hope you found the session useful. And thank you to each of the presenters as well for sharing the work that your projects have done. I really enjoyed the presentations, they were very insightful. I'm just going to share my screen and give some information about how to get involved with the Dare UK programme. So there's a QR code you can scan there to subscribe to our mailing list, where you'll be any information about upcoming events and further work that we are doing will be shared. And as shared in the chat previously, the full outputs from each of the driver projects are available to view. Perhaps if someone from the team could just drop a link again into the chat so that you can follow that link and look at the reports from each of the 5 driver projects. So again, just to say thank you for attending and enjoy the rest of your day.